Hope you enjoyed all the action from week 1, but buckle up because week 2 is officially arrived. And here to help us break down one of the biggest games of the weekend between Nebraska and Colorado, look who it is. It's Adam Munsterteiger from Buff Stampede and Michael Bruntz from Husker 24/7. It's the rematch, guys. We have Colorado at Nebraska. This was such a fun matchup last year. Let's remind you of this series. It's a series that we've gotten quite a bit over the last few years, but this will be the last scheduled Colorado-Nebraska game, so make sure you soak it up. The Buffs, they came away with a win at home last season, 36-14. This Big 12 throwback series comes to Nebraska for another iteration. Let's start with what happened in week 1, because both of these teams come in 1-0. So let's start with just what did we learn about each team. Michael, kick us off with Nebraska. What did we learn?
Well, it was the first time seeing Dylan Raiola in a Nebraska uniform, a very anticipated debut. He looked poised. He didn't play like a freshman, and he was standing on the sidelines by the middle of the third quarter. So as far as Nebraska was kind of concerned, it was an efficient opener. They played over 100 players against UTEP. And, you know, I think you kind of saw what the strength is going to be for them this year. They're going to rely a lot on that defense. They're going to need some big plays from the offense and kind of sprinkle in some kind of a downhill ball control running game. And that was a pretty good recipe against UTEP. So for a team that hadn't won a season opener since 2019, it was kind of welcome to have the backups in there and get some guys some much needed snaps on the second and third teams.
For Colorado, they did prove that this offensive line is better than the unit they had out there in 2023, in which Shedeur Sanders was sacked 52 times in 10 and a half games before he suffered a fracture in his back. Now, it wasn't a perfect performance by Colorado's offensive line, but as we expected, the floor of that group is quite a bit higher than it was last year. Shedeur Sanders was still pressured 13 times in that football game, but he was only sacked once. And so as valuable as Shedeur Sanders is to Colorado in their hopes for this season, you never want to see him hit, but it was definitely a market improvement from last season. And then, Travis Hunter and Jimmy Horn, some of the skill talent we expected, we knew going into the season was going to be pretty good, but it was the trenches that showed itself to be improved. And you even go over to the defensive line. Chidozie Nwankwo, a transfer from Houston, graded out as their top defender. So definitely better in the trenches this season, but there's still holes within this football program that they're going to have to get fixed, especially as the schedule gets tougher going forward.
Yeah, Adam, along those lines, Shedeur Sanders seemingly picking up where he left off, but outside of being upright more frequently, what's different about him this year?
There's just a better chemistry between Shedeur Sanders and the offensive coordinator this year. Last year, Sean Lewis came in from Kent State, and he runs an up-tempo system that just did not fit Shedeur Sanders and his preference. He likes to be on the same page with guys. He doesn't like a lot of choice routes. He wants to know where his teammates are going to be. And with Pat Shurmur taking over play calling duties late last season and then growing into the role this year, Pat Shurmur has been in the NFL as a head coach, as an offense coordinator, but this is his first time calling plays at the college level. And you kind of saw that chemistry between the two really grow this offseason. There's a lot more comfortability that Shedeur Sanders has with his offensive scheme as opposed to a year ago.
All right, on the other side, you said it, Michael, we finally saw the Dylan debut. Raiola, he shined in week 1, but what is it going to take for him to win this game against Colorado?
Yeah, the windows are obviously going to be a little bit tighter on the throws this week that he's going to see. From last year's game against Colorado, one thing that Nebraska wanted to add were bigger-bodied downfield threats in the passing game, and they did that with Isaiah Nair, a wide receiver transfer from Texas, Jamal Banks, another wide receiver transfer from Wake Forest. Both of those guys are 6'4". They each caught touchdown passes in the opener against UTEP. And so Nebraska's going to have to kind of do a little bit more of what they did against UTEP. A couple deep balls here and there. The intermediate passing game is going to have to be on point. And, I think a really big key for Nebraska and helping Dylan Raiola out is going to be whether or not they can run the ball with any kind of consistency. You saw Nebraska really kind of stay on schedule with their third down conversions against UTEP. They're going to have to do that against Colorado and really kind of try to work to keep that really good Colorado offense off the field. So they're going to need to be efficient. And, I think Dylan Raiola is just going to have to kind of rise to the moment a little bit. I mean, he really looked poised in the opener, but it's going to be a night game in Lincoln with a lot of eyeballs on him. So it's going to be this week for what he's facing.
I mentioned at the top just how fun this rivalry is. Dylan Raiola mentioning this week that his dad, Dominic, reminded him that he never once lost to Colorado while he was at Nebraska. So a fun little family dynamic going on there. Someone that's going to try to cause some problems for Raiola probably is Travis Hunter. He has once again proven to be a problem for opposing offenses and defenses. Now, Michael, I want you to follow up with how Nebraska plans to stop him, but let's start with Adam. Where has he gotten better this year?
He's gotten better just as a receiver. And really the biggest thing with Travis Hunter is just health. And that's been the case through his entire college career. When he's been healthy, he's been a special difference maker out there. He started his college career coming in as the top ranked recruit in the entire country with a pretty severe ankle injury. And so he was never really at 100% his first year at Jackson State. Last year started out like gangbusters, kind of like he did in the season opener this year, but then took a shot in week three and had to come back from that injury and started to kind of get it back towards the end of the season. But when Travis Hunter's been out there, he's been one of the most unique players in college football. I think the longer he's stayed healthy and gotten more practice reps in at the receiver position during his college career, you're starting to see some of those nuances and a couple of those catches he made against North Dakota State with some next level stuff. And it really begins the debate of what side of the ball is he a better pro prospect. I think you would have said cornerback until maybe Thursday night when all of a sudden he's starting to look like an All-American caliber type receiver as well.
Yeah, it's going to be a challenge for Nebraska's secondary to deal with him on offense. I mean, this was, a group that, really kind of had a quiet first week, and all of a sudden you're going to be facing some really good skill talent, probably the best they're going to see until Ohio State week. So I look to Nebraska's junior corner, Tommy Hill. He's going to need to have a good game on Saturday against Colorado. He was a pretty quiet opener. He started to show up in NFL mock drafts as a potential first or second round pick. So this is going to be a really big game for Tommy Hill. And just kind of trying to get, Colorado off pace on offense, Nebraska's going to have to win up front with their defensive line. I mean, I think at times they might have to get a little bit more exotic with some of their blitz looks, but I think they're hoping that their front four can win against Colorado's offensive line with some kind of consistency. So I think that's going to be a big key. Otherwise, Nebraska is going to be a little bit exposed in the secondary with some of that great skill talent.
Guys, we've been doing this fun thing this year where we simulate this game 20 times on EA College Football 25, and Colorado winning it 14 of those 20 times. So for each team, let's start with Michael. Make the case. Both of these coaches enter year 2, big rivalry game. Who needs this win more?
Well, I mean, this is a big potential springboard for Matt Rhule in year 2. I mean, everybody's pretty knows by now kind of how the schedule works with Matt Rhule's teams. And year 2 is kind of when they start to take off. And, there's going to be a lot of eyes on this game, primetime game in Lincoln. The opening couple months of Nebraska's schedule actually sets up pretty favorably. So if they can get past this game, there's going to be a real opportunity for Nebraska to make some noise potentially in the Big Ten later in the year. So this is a big one. Nebraska, has not typically fared well in recent years in these kinds of really big, well looked at games. So it would be a real big boost for Nebraska in year 2 of the Matt Rhule era to get a big win on Saturday.
I'd expect every Nebraska fan to disagree with this, but I think it's a bigger game for Colorado in Coach Prime Sanders in his second season, because when you look at Nebraska, Dylan Raiola is a freshman, and they have their quarterback of the future. For Colorado, it's about maximizing this final year of Shedeur Sanders at the college level, about maximizing the final year of Travis Hunter in his two-way ability. Those are just two guys that don't come along very often, and so they need to maximize the remaining year of eligibility for both those guys before they go off to the NFL. But certainly a huge game, especially you mentioned there are no future games scheduled between Colorado and Nebraska. So whoever wins this game, that fan base gets bragging rights for a very long time. So it's a huge game for both teams without question.
Yeah, it's hard to answer the question, who needs this win more? Definitely hard to answer the question for the fan bases, who wants this win more? This is a huge rivalry game and one that we don't really know the future of, so we got to soak it up. Thank you guys both so much for the great previews. As always, you can check out their work here. Keep it locked into Buff Stampede for all things Colorado football, and Huskers 24/7 for everything you need to know about Nebraska. These two writers and their whole crew have you covered all season long.